Okay, I want to go over this warm up that we were given in class. I just want to make sure everyone understands these problems. And if you are absent, hopefully this video can help you get caught up. So here we are going to be graphing just part of the U. I'm restricting the domain. So we know quadratics are U-shaped, but we are now only going to accept inputs that are 0 and above. So if we start with a 0, I'm going to get a 2 as an outcome. 0 squared plus 2 is 2. Since my inputs have to be greater, we'll plug in a 1. If you plug in a 1, you're going to get a 3. 1 squared plus 2 is a 3. If you plug in a 2, you're going to get 2 squared, which is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. And I really don't have room, but if I would plug in a 3, I would all be off my graph up here at 11. Okay, so you can just draw half a U. Okay, that is the original function. Well, we are now going to find its inverse. And you remember I mentioned that I can actually graph the inverse before finding the rule. Okay, there is my line y equals x, and if I could fold this, I'm going to have a mirror image about this line. So this is 0, 2. I know I'm going to have the point 2, 0. Okay. I have the point 1, 3. I know I'm going to have 3, 1. This dot right here is 2, 6. I'm going to have the point 6, 2. So we're going to have this be my inverse. Okay. But let's find it. Let's actually find the rule, and hopefully you understand that the inverse of a quadratic is a square root function. So the rules to find the inverse, I switch my roles of x and y. Okay, so I have x squared equals y squared plus 2, and now I'm going to solve for y. It's going to take me 2 steps. It's going to have me subtract a2 and take the square root. So now in this case, when I take the square root, so I'm taking the square root of both sides, I'm left with the square root of x minus 2. And I only want the positive roots because of my restriction on my domain. So I'm only going to have the positive, not the negative. So I'm not going to have the graph go down like this. So this is my inverse, the square root of x minus 2. And I promise you, if you plug it into your calculator, you see this. We already knew what the graph was going to look like before we found the rule. But that's how we find inverses of each other. Okay? Switch the roles of x and y, solve for y. Now, on your test, it'll be a linear function, but I want you to be aware of how to find the inverses of other types of functions. Now, the rest of this, you're going to see 4 equations on your test. These should not take long. Okay, I want you to know exactly what to do. So when you see a problem like number 2, I need you to know that we must get rid of this minus 3 first. So we must add a 3. So that's a legal move. And then once I do that, I must get rid of that radical. Okay, I can't divide by 125. I must get rid of cube root by cubing both sides. Okay, 5 cubed is 125. By cubing the cube root, it wipes out the radical and you're left with 125. And then the last move, I can now divide and I get a nice answer of 1. Okay, that's how easy it should be. The next one, very similar, or I have to get this all by itself. Okay, so I need to undo the minus 10 by adding a 10. So I get negative 15. I have a negative 5 in front, and then the 4th root of n. I am not ready to raise to the 4th power yet because I can divide by negative 5. I must get rid of this outside number. It's not in parentheses. So I'm going to divide. It turns into a 3 on the left. And now my last move is to raise to the 4th power. And then I'm done because it's only an m inside the radical. So I raise. I get m by itself. That's what I wanted. And 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is an 81. And I am finished. Okay? For number 4, very similar. It's going to take really 3 moves to get an answer. My first move is to add a 3. So when I add, I'm going to use a calculator just because I know I'm going to end up having to divide. So when I add a 3, I get negative 128. So there's your first move. Then I'm going to divide by negative 2. Should be 64, but let's do this. It's going to be 64. And then my last move, I have a power of 3 halves. We learned to undo a power of 3 halves, raise both sides to its reciprocal. So I'm going to ask my calculator. Let's see here. I'm going to take that 64 and I'm going to raise it to the 2/3. And it tells me a 16. And there's my answer. Okay? So the first 3 equations, it was all about inverse operations. Well, number 5, you got to be careful with number 5. This is going to be where we have to factor it then. So our first move, this radical, there's nothing on the outside to undo. So my first move is to undo the square root by squaring. But it is your job to know how to square n minus 4. Okay, that is where so many students make their mistakes. And you've seen this type of problem several times now. So off to the side, I'm going to take n minus 4 times n minus 4. And I'm going to get n squared minus my outers and inners will add up to a negative 8n. So if you can't see that, make a box, do whatever you need to realize negative 4n and a negative 4n is a negative 8n. And then my last, I multiply and I get a positive 16. So on the right-hand side, I will have this. Okay? And with practice, I can look at that and know that it's n squared minus 8n plus 16, but it takes a while to get to that point. So now we must bring everything over so that we get 0. So we do the opposites. I now have 0 on the left, and I'm going to factor n squared minus 14n plus 48. Okay? This should be easy to factor. 2 sets of parentheses, and n minus minus, and then ways of getting 48, you'll eventually see that 8 times 6, okay? 8 times 6, and then the good news is it agrees with the negative 14n. So if you have an 8 and a 6, the outers and inners agree with negative 14. Therefore, I know I factored it correctly, and now I can say my answers. 8 is an answer, 6 is an answer. Now, both of these work, so there's neither one's an extraneous solution. And like I said, on your test, if I have an extraneous solution, you're not going to lose points if you don't cross it out. So I just want you to be aware that there are times when we do all the work correctly and we get answers that actually don't check. But both these answers will check. You will get a true statement if you plug in an 8 in for n, or you plug in a 6. They both work out. So thank you for watching. That took about 9 minutes to do, but I'm hoping you're getting ready for this Chapter 5 exam. So please ask for help if you need help on anything in Chapter 5. Thanks for watching.